it's hard to foment a revolution when the beloved pillars of culture are left intact.
Why do you care? It's just a kid's thing.
Right. It's, there's magic in it. So anything goes. It doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah. Why do you care that it makes sense? Yeah.
We're the guardians of what kids get to see and learn and know. And we should make sure that what they're being fed are good things that help them to grow in positive ways.
The whole idea of it's just for kids, it shouldn't matter. It can just be nonsensical or whatever. I would say anyone who says that either doesn't have kids or doesn't care about kids.
Yeah, exactly.
And they clearly don't understand the gravity of what you're dealing with when you are putting information into a child's head.
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Our topic today is gaslighting grown-ups to groom kids. Now, that doesn't quite tell you what we're talking about, so we're going to kind of illustrate it here right at first. So, Thomas, I understand that when you watched the Wheel of Time show on Amazon Prime, you had some thoughts. Do you want to share some of those?
I did. Now, to put a quick caveat on this, I have read most of the first book.
Right.
But I have two brothers who are big fans of the series and read every book.
Okay.
So I have,
and I've read all the books.
Okay. So I've had that in the background. But anyway, in reading the book, the town where everything begins, this little village that's existed for, I think you said some 2,000
years. Yeah.
And one of the things you notice right off the bat in the TV, and I think Amazon's rendition of this, is the racial diversity in this town, where you have to ask the question, how in the world there's this racial diversity in a town where hardly anybody goes or comes into the town?
And that's a point made many times.
Many times. And so I found that to be inconsistent and not believable according to what the story is.
You found that unbelievable? You found racial diversity in a small town unbelievable in a TV show about wizards who can control the elements, Thomas? That's just ridiculous. It shouldn't have to make sense.
Gaslighting, Mike?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the argument we see from these defenders of these shows it's usually around woke themes, but sometimes it's around other things.
Yeah. Why do you care? It's just a kid's thing.
Right. It's, there's magic in it. So anything goes. It doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah. Why do you care that it makes sense?
Right. One answer is you should abide by the rules of the universe you've set up. If you've set up a town in the middle of nowhere where no one comes and goes, and the families have been there for 2,000 years, they should be roughly the same race after 2,000 years.
Pretty homogenous at that point, I would say.
Yeah. And that's factual. All the names of the characters go back 2,000 years to when the town was founded. So that's kind of what we're going to try to break down. Why are they coming out with this, frankly, fallacious argument? And we looked it up. Did you write down the name of the fallacy, Thomas?
The appeal to stone fallacy, I think, is kind of the popular name of it, but the actually Latin term is
argumentum ad lapid, if you're one of those Latin nerds.
Argumentum ad lapid.
Yeah, drop that in your next conversation. That'll stump them.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a way of deflecting from having to actually address the argument being made.
Yeah, it just says, oh, it's silly anyway, so why should we have to, talk about this?
Dismissive, why do we need to consider it? You're taking this too seriously. What does it matter? And I know you kind of brought this topic up as you've seen, or we've all experienced this in different ways, but you were specifically talking about how it can be used to dismiss children's stories or something like that as they don't have to be consistent or make sense or good because they're kids' stories. Yeah,
the thing that kind of put me onto this was, newsflash, I like Star Wars.
We had no idea.
So it seems like nowadays, if you make any criticism of Disney's Star Wars products, you'll hear, it's a TV show or movie about space wizards with laser swords. Why do you care? And
same argument.
Yeah, it's the same argument. And I'm like, well, I care because the universe has set up rules and you're breaking the rules. Right. And it doesn't have to obey the rules of our universe, but it has to obey the rules it sets for itself.
Yeah, consistency matters.
Yeah. And also children's stories doesn't mean low quality. It doesn't mean it doesn't have to make sense. A good children's story should be good as a child and as an adult.
Well, some of the most beloved stories even for adults, are children's stories.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, the Chronicles of Narnia are kids' stories. And in the 7th book, The Last Battle, it's literally the biblical apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's not like the themes aren't intense or mature.
Yeah, it has consistency. And, that also begs the question of, if you're arguing it doesn't really matter, it's just for kids, it doesn't have to have consistency, it doesn't have to make any sense, it's just whatever. We can do whatever we want. Well, my question is, why do you want to?
Right. Yeah. If it doesn't matter, then just cast all white people, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. But of course they won't do that. And that's, I think, what we determined is the reasoning behind this argument, right?
Yeah, it's to avoid having to give an explanation for why there is an inconsistency that's been introduced into the story or movie or whatever. And
the inconsistency is introduced for the reason of evangelizing their particular soapbox, their particular belief.
Right. That's what we're seeing in our current era. That's why we titled it Grooming Kids. There's definitely, as we have repeatedly noted, but there's definitely we're in the midst of a cultural revolution, and those fomenting this revolution are dissatisfied with our old values. Mm-hmm. They see our old values as problematic or evil.
Right. Like being on time is a whiteness thing.
And so, they have.
That's from the Smithsonian. I didn't make it up.
Yeah, okay. I think the Smithsonian had to drop that after the controversy.
They did.
But this is a technique that's been applied over and over and over again to deflect from having to address the legitimate criticism someone may raise regarding obvious change that has been imported into a well-known story like Star Wars or another story that's been written before all this and is being changed for like the modern era for like a TV show or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So in Star Wars, the example that you usually will see this argument used in response to is Rey Skywalker, as they call her in their movies, is perfect. She never fails at anything. Every time she tries something, she's immediately successful. And, that doesn't match with any of the other characters in any of the other movies. And, people will suggest they did this because they are incapable of showing women with flaws nowadays. And the response will be, like we said, it's a movie about space wizards with laser swords, and you have a problem with a woman being good at stuff? And it's like, that's not what I have a problem with.
Well, the other part of this fallacy is they'll take it a step further, and then they'll import a nefarious motive for the objection to the change. So whoever's noticing they're doing something where they're changing it, they say, well, why do you care? And you do care because you're actually a sexist or you're actually a racist or something like that. So they import a false motive, a potentially false motive for the person that's raising the objection.
Yeah. Classic gaslighting.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
You redirect what you're actually doing onto the person in question or who is questioning.
Yeah. Right. And since we're talking about gaslighting, this is my favorite gaslighting joke.
Okay.
Which is, oh, you think gaslighting is real? You're crazy. You made it up. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, clearly.
I just love that. I think it's great.
Right. Well, Sterling, are there any other movies where you think are good examples of this you're seeing?
Well, another one that's very like Rey Skywalker and gets the same kind of response is Captain Marvel in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where she's never wrong or fails at anything. And people are like, that's bad writing. And the response is, oh, it's a fantasy world and also you're sexist. Yeah. But you see it with some of the newer stuff as well. Like in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, you have a character who's the entire movie wearing a transgender pin maybe it's just a LGBTQ flag and a shirt that says love is love. And that's fine. I guess that's real. It's a thing people wear, but why do you have to put it in the movie? And their response is, it's a movie about magic and wizards and superheroes. Why do you care? And well, I care because you care, because you're doing this because you're trying to push your message.
Unless what they're saying is it's not real.
Yeah, there you go. Love is not love, and the LGBTQ doesn't exist. There we go.
They're not saying that, but yeah, that's a good rebuttal.
Yeah.
What was that movie, Sterling, that you mentioned? Was it The Crayon or?
Yeah, this was just kind of what put me onto the thought, but they're making a new movie. And I don't know, I don't have any criticism about this movie. All we've got so far is a trailer based on the classic kids book, Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Yeah.
Which is a great book about a kid with a crayon who uses his imagination to draw things and then they come real and he can, use those. And yeah, so that That's just a trailer we've got so far. It's about Harold as a grown-up, for some reason, played by Zachary Levi. That's a movie that's coming out, and it just made me think of this whole argument, but I don't actually have any criticism for it. But I think the response from us should be, well, it should make sense. You know, just because it's a movie about space wizards with laser swords, that's not an excuse to be lazy and to write things that don't make sense, because you're feeding it to our kids. Yeah. We're the guardians of what kids get to see and learn and know. And we should make sure that what they're being fed are good things that help them to grow in positive ways. You don't want to, you know, teach them bad messages or just insert a successful, you know, black female judge into a movie just because you can. You should have a reason to do that.
Right. I mean, even just what you're communicating in any story is by dismissing of objections based upon consistency and logic. The world is consistent and logical.
Right.
As far as how things work, there is the reason we can do science is because of that.
Yeah.
And when you're introducing this idea that actually consistency doesn't matter, in one sense, you want to push it far enough, it goes back to this kind of postmodern mindset regarding truth or ultimate truth that we've kind of embraced as a culture, which dismisses the notion of any kind of absolute truth. And so everything then boils down to opinion. And in one sense, what they're saying by dismissing an observation like that regarding a story is, well, that's just your opinion, man. So it doesn't really matter. It's just a preference issue. But actually, no, it's more than that. It's a recognition that there's an inconsistency within whatever the art form is that you're criticizing. And what you're suggesting is this should have been, or why did they do this? There needs to be, if they're doing it, what's the reason they're doing it? And maybe we can explore that rather than just dismissing it as, well, it's a fairy tale, so who cares?
Right. Right. Yeah. And the reason why, as we've said, is we think it's because they do care.
Yeah.
They're making an argument they don't even believe in because it lets them get away with inserting their soapbox into the movie.
Yeah. It's a cover. It's a cover of not having to explain themselves when they decide to do something.
Yeah. And it's a kid's story, going back to that. That's an old argument. It's a kid's story. It doesn't make sense. It's not high quality. It doesn't matter. That's an argument that goes back, you know, to C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. And they wrote essays. Like Tolkien wrote like a 40-page essay on that about why he was specifically talking about fairy stories, but he was using that as the context of kids' stories. And he was talking about these are the lessons kids are learning about the world around them. And it's actually better to teach them these lessons in a format where there's a magic witch or a magic wizard who, you know, gives them a potion that lets them fly or whatever, rather than a more closely realistic world where where what happens is possible, but ridiculously improbable at every step. So it's better to teach kids that a wizard might give you a potion that'll let you fly than to teach kids that, you know, you can become the president of the United States if you try hard enough. You could, but it's ridiculously implausible.
Well, maybe the deeper question on that probably Tolkien was getting at was you're trying to impart to kids principles regarding life. The manner in which you're imparting these, like through fairy tale stories or something like that, they're automatically, generally speaking, for kids, much more interesting and exciting because of their awakening imaginations and their experience of the world and these neat things, and they're still in that developmental phase where they're, you know, growing into understanding things around them and just imaginations. So what Tolkien and Lewis were doing was directing it, not fighting against it. They weren't just saying, that's not real, so you should stop believing that. What they were trying to say was, what about these stories, which we obviously know are mythical, but what are the truths that life truths that can be imparted through them?
Yeah.
And in a sense, that's exactly what the woke are trying to do, but they're not being honest about it.
Right. They're not being honest about it.
What they're doing is they're challenging those old truths, and they're trying to impart new truths.
Which not only are not true, And not only do they know they aren't true,
Right.
but they're also untested.
And so they don't want to have to try to defend him. And so the way they avoid that is to dismiss any objection to it as like, well, it's kids' stories.
Yeah.
Why do you care?
Right. And my response to that is, well, one of my favorite movies, it's not my top 5, but it's one of my favorite movies, is a kid's movie. It's The Lion King. It's a great movie. And it teaches you a lot about standing up and taking responsibility for yourself and for your actions and for those around you, and trying to do what is in your power to make the world a better place. And that's all lessons you learn from The Lion King, a movie about lions singing about how they can't wait to be king. I mean, it's not a serious movie. It is silly, but it's not nonsensical.
Right. And, there's the theme of bravery there and self-sacrifice. I mean, those are two significant values that kids can learn through that movie.
Right.
Yeah, but it'd be very easy just to say, what do you care? It's just a movie about lions who sing.
Right. So the attitude that they kind of try to push is, it's for kids. It's allowed to be nonsensical and silly. It's just something to occupy their time. And I think you, Andrew, as a father, have some opinions about some shows that do that kind of thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. One in particular is a show called Coco Melon, which
is quite popular.
It is very popular, but I don't really let my kids watch it anymore, mainly because of how it's edited. The jump cuts are just really, really fast. And it creates, in my opinion, it's an attention span deficit. So it's a problem with the attention spans. And I just think it's not good mentally for kids.
So I think that's something lots of people have noticed, is that our attention spans are kind of being forced to be shorter.
Yeah. So that's just one example. But back to the whole idea of it's just for kids, it shouldn't matter. It can just be nonsensical or whatever. I would say anyone who says that either doesn't have kids or doesn't care about kids.
Yeah, exactly.
And they clearly don't understand the gravity of what you're dealing with when you are putting information into a child's head, because that's not just information. That is literally forming their brain matter. I mean, the neuroplasticity of a child is immense. You can mold them into just about anything. And it's really dangerous when you're putting stuff there that's going to put them down a bad path that's going to lead to a horrible future.
I have an example of this from when I was a child. It was cassette tapes at the time, but it was this Focus on the Family show, Adventures in Odyssey, on cassette tapes that you listen to, and it's a dramatized radio program.
Good stuff.
Very good stuff, and I'm a big fan. But because I listened to these Adventures in Odyssey tapes that we had so much as a kid, sometimes even today I'll find myself saying, oh, this is what we believe as Christians, or thinking that anyhow. And then I'm like, where did I get that from? Is it from the Bible? And I check, I'm like, I can't find it in the Bible. And I'm like, I learned that from Adventures in Odyssey, and maybe it's not actually theologically sound. But it still has stuck with me, and I'm almost 30.
It's a great example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think about the Teletubbies?
Oh my God. I'm
The
glad
purple one with the upside down triangle is making your kids gay.
My gosh. Well, I'm just glad that it's not popular anymore, I guess.
Yeah. Is that what you grew up on?
No. My parents barely let me watch Barney.
Okay.
And of course, by, pre-K, I was singing the song about Barney dying. I can't remember it right now.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I don't think because of where I grew up, I didn't grow up with much TV as a small child. But what I do remember when I was about 7, 8 was more being exposed to like Sesame Street and stuff like that, which I think it has its pros and its cons. But at least Sesame Street, especially back then, there was much more of a kind of, it took educating kids entertainingly seriously. And I think that the point you're making, it really matters. And
it does.
And as a parent, you need to be concerned about what you are, I guess, what brain food you're giving your kids when it comes to what they're ingesting, what they're watching, I guess, with kind of shows.
That is what it's brain food.
Yeah.
And you can see that they're injecting their woke beliefs into these kids shows. I should have checked on this before we began, but I saw a screenshot from an episode of, I think it was like a Netflix kid show or something, about a transgender turtle or something like that, saying, I look like a boy, but I identify as a girl. And it's like, this is being fed to your kids. And probably you aren't even watching because it's annoying kid stuff that you just turn on and then turn away and do whatever you were doing so your kid can watch it.
What do you care? It's just about turtles who talk.
Right, exactly. Well, this turtle's trans, and I don't want my kid to even think about that. You know, that would be my response.
Yeah, it's not like Yertle the turtle.
Right. Yeah, Yertle the turtle, that was about Hitler, wasn't it?
Was it?
I think that was like the inspiration from Seuss, because he was Dr. Seuss was very anti-Hitler.
Yeah, he was.
And yes. Yertle the turtle is, of course, about a turtle who climbs on the back of another turtle and then convinces more and more turtles.
He's on top of all the turtles,
so he can see super far.
So far.
Yeah.
And then that one turtle on the very bottom.
Yeah. How does it end? Remind me.
I don't remember if the one turtle on the bottom like sneezes or something. He's complaining.
Yeah.
And then finally the whole turtle column collapses with you.
You're right. Because
into the
the oppressed masses finally wake up, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's a principle in a story there, right?
Right. Yeah. And it teaches you that just because you can do something like convince another turtle or kid to let you piggyback ride or whatever, doesn't mean you should.
But it also, but it also teaches from the other perspective, beware of people who try to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Try to take advantage of others for their own personal benefit.
And that's, good stories should have themes and lessons.
Yeah.
And so that's why we care, because we want the themes and lessons to be good themes and lessons. Like
and understandable. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we've criticized woke movies or the wokeness of being injected into these beloved classics or stuff like that. And one of our common criticisms is write your own stories. But I wonder if they just don't know how to, in a lot of senses.
I think that's true, but I think like with Star Wars, this is one of my big things is they're like, why are you so angry about Star Wars? Just let people enjoy what they enjoy. And that's fine. If you enjoy the new Star Wars movies, enjoy them. I won't come to your house and tell you why you're wrong, but you are wrong. But you took an apple I had, and then you turned it into a pear, and I didn't want the pear. I liked the apple. And you're telling me that the pear is the same thing as the apple, and it's a different thing. And all I'm doing is saying this is a different thing. And people say, you're racist or you're sexist or you just don't like Ray or whatever.
Well, it may, Thomas, to your point, it may have something to do with an inability to write story, but I think it more often is just that they want to deconstruct what is there.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say.
That's what Sterling was. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think there's a deconstructive motivation for sure. It's hard to foment a revolution when the beloved pillars of culture are left intact.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what they do is you have to attack those beloved pillars of culture and tear them down, or so transform them that they actually reinforce the new values rather than the old.
Yeah.
And then tell everybody, why do you care? It's just about space wizards.
Yes. Why do you care?
We can make it anything we want because it's about space wizards.
Right. And that's kind of why the Harold and the Purple Crayon movie made me think of this, because it's just another example of how they can't come up with anything original. So they find something from the past and they use that as their selling point.
Yeah. And another thought that just popped in my head, why do they attack, or why do they go after children's stuff? Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, adults in general are less keyed in on what's happening with children's stuff and more keyed in on maybe something that they themselves might be more focused on, entertaining themselves by, or TV shows. They're going to be, if they don't have kids especially, or if their kids are teenagers or something, they're going to be less aware of like, for example, you're telling me that they're going to do this movie with Harold and the Purple Crayon or whatever. I wouldn't have thought, oh, I wonder how they're going to write that, or I can't wait to see that, because it's a child's story and I'm not generally going out to see new child's, films that are designed or in the target audience being children. I'm just generally not doing that as an adult with no kids.
Right. So you wouldn't know if they're inserting stuff into it. Yeah.
And so, which almost has me asking the question now, since it's been so long since I was a child and seeing this stuff that Hollywood's put out or everything. So, I mean, I'm familiar with some of the cartoons that kids, probably now adults, grew up on that I wasn't watching, but like SpongeBob. I've never seen an episode of SpongeBob, but I heard about SpongeBob.
I've watched like all of SpongeBob.
So most of our generation has. I'm the weirdo whose parents wouldn't let me.
Right. No. So I don't know what kind of lessons or what kind of ideas were being imparted from stuff like that over the generation since when I was watching kids shows. It would be kind of fascinating to see some of the values that I'm sure there was slight changes or maybe pretty dramatic changes in values that were being presented in some of these kid shows.
Well, you reminded me of something. We mentioned this a couple episodes ago, I think, but it's exactly on topic for what we're talking about right now, is the new X-Men 97 show, which we talked about has a character who they're now identifying as non-binary in 2024. They're saying this character was always non-binary. But in the actual show that ended in 1997, he was not non-binary because the idea of non-binary did not exist.
No, it might have been in academia, but beyond that.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it might have applied to sci-fi talking about alien races or something, but it wasn't a human thing.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly the same thing. It's why do you care if he's non-binary? It's a show about mutants. And also the mutants have always been about civil rights. Well, there's, as we said in the other episode, there's different levels of oppression. And not all oppression is equal.
Yep.
What was that famous? I think it was a line from Hitler, but maybe it was Stalin, or maybe it was Mao. Basically, about giving him the kids, and within a generation.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That he would have them all.
That was Hitler.
Was it Hitler?
I'm fairly confident.
I think it was. I can't remember if. Yeah, we'll go with that. I don't know for sure, so I won't say anything.
Yeah.
I wonder if using that name is going to mess us up.
It shouldn't. It's ridiculous not to be able to talk about probably the most significant figure of the 20th century.
Adolf. We can get away with saying Adolf.
Well, I don't know if that's much better. It's not like there's lots of kids running around named Adolf.
Yeah.
Yeah. Adolf, the red-nosed reindeer.
Yeah. Great. Great.
Oh man, I'm not even going to go down that right
now. That's the next kid's story they're going to write.
Oh no. No, please.
Man.
So I guess we wanted to make this episode just to tell you, if they respond to you with that argument, it means you're over the target. Yeah. It's like the video game Maxim. If you're running into enemies, you're going the right direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Or from airplanes, if you're taking flak, it means you're over the enemy.
Yeah. Don't let
over the target.
Don't let anybody diminish your concerns or tell you, why do you care? Or even say, you must be the problem because you care.
Right.
Yeah. There's one caveat here, and I'll just put this out there. Sometime people will come at you with this response because they're not invested in what you are invested in, and they're just kind of like mystified as to why you care so much about like Star Wars for a second. If I was talking to my wife, for example, about something that I'm interested in that's fantasy like this, I could see her maybe saying, well, why does it matter? It's fantasy. So that's not.
It may sometimes be an honest question.
Yeah, it's just that they're not interested in engaging in it, and maybe they're saying, "Hey, you're taking this too seriously from their perspective of what matters versus doesn't matter." So I would just put that one in just because I think that is also probably commonly used as just a way to basically not want to have to continue a conversation that they're not interested in.
Yeah, that's for sure true. I encounter this argument a lot online in these forums that are dedicated to the topic. So,
right.
I know that's not what they're doing.
That's not what they're doing there. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So not our longest episode, but I think we covered the topic we wanted to cover.
Yeah. That's a good one.
So our topic again was gaslighting grown-ups to groom kids. And we broke down their argument, which is a appeal to the stone, or just saying it's silly, therefore we shouldn't have to talk about this. And the response is, it's not silly, and you don't even believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be silly, or at least it shouldn't be silly at the expense of sense.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been the Pop Culture Contrarian with Thomas Sterling and Andrew. We're brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's right. It's free. Be sure to like and subscribe. Bye.